Welcome back, and here we are out at Tallarook, and we're on the side of Mount Hickey, and today I'm going to have a crack at heading up this left-hand track. Yes, there is a track up there to the left, believe it or not, and just to the right there you can see that's Phone Track, and we're right up the top section of Phone Track here. And this section here gets avoided by everybody pretty much. There's only like less than 10% of the people that come out this way, even including all the people that have got 37s and twin locked. They all sort of avoid this track. And it's fair to say that a lot of the bigger vehicles even struggle with all that gear over there on the right side of Phone Track. But this section here is extremely gnarly, and you could end up on your roof no problems on a lot of places on this bit here. Probably the biggest problem with this section and heading up it, even vehicles that have got 37s land on the middle of these rocks. That's how far they stick up out of there. So heading up here in a pretty standard Discovery just with one diff lock and a 50mm lift and on skinnies is going to be quite the challenge. But I absolutely back in the Discovery with its balance and just how incredible they are off-road from new. And as I've mentioned before, it's the only passenger vehicle four-wheel drive ever made that has a military platform underneath it, and that's just why it is so capable. There's actually two parts to the filming on this video, because I come out the day before, but I got here pretty late in the afternoon with only an hour's daylight left, and I thought, well, I won't tackle it now, just in case anything does go wrong. So recovering off this at night would be an absolute pain in the neck, especially by yourself. So we give it a miss that day and then come out the next day, and unfortunately got there late again, but we still had a couple of hours of light left. And I just thought, that's it, let's hit it. But the problem was I just wasn't prepared. All sorts of stuff was going on between batteries not being charged for the drone and the drone running off and returning to home in the middle of filming and having to pull up where I should have been still nailed. And yeah, we got hung up on a few things that could have quite easily been driven. Well, I don't know about easily, but it could have been driven. And we're going to come back and we'll do it again, because I want to do this without pulling the winch out from start to finish. Because I'm quite sure most people get it by now that have followed the four-wheel driving on social media, and that there's a lot of waffle about what cars can do what and all that, and some cars measured to cars that have got 37s and standard and all this sort of thing. But what I can definitely say about heading up this track is that there is only the tiniest of handfuls of vehicles that could ever make this track as standard as what the Discovery is. And they definitely won't be the ones that everyone raves about. The true measurement of a great four-wheel drive is what do they like to start with before modification. How good are they before any money's been spent? Because the basics of a good four-wheel drive don't change when you spend the money. They're set in stone when they're designed to start with. A lot struggle to even just head up the left-hand side of this track, which is the popular side, even with the 37s and all the gear. And another thing to take into consideration is a lot of people don't want to be doing this sort of thing with their four-wheel drive. They want to be setting up a camper on the back of a tray. Critical things on the Discovery getting up here today will be the things it left the factory with. Its balance, its light, it's agile. The tyre pressures that I'm tackling this with today, I've just got it down to 18 because I'm in no mood to throw something off a rim and be trying to change wheels and get tyres back on halfway up this track. So they're a little bit more pressure in it than I'd like. Well, a lot more, because they're about 50%. I'd rather tackle this track around 10 PSI, even with these tyres on it. I've had no trouble with these tyres in at 10 PSI. Because the Discovery is a light car, it doesn't need the bead locks like a lot of these big heavier cars, because they tend to throw the tyres off the beads a lot easier with all that weight moving around on the rim. This bit here I'm filming was the day before, and you can see it had no drama driving up onto that rock there. I was just testing it the day before before I come back and done it the next day. The problem was with the next day that I hadn't hit record when I come up this first bit, so the recording basically starts from where I've landed on the top of this rock, and I've got the sill sitting, the step or the slider sitting hard on the top of the rock. This spot here, you'll see, this is the usual stuff if you look up this track. Carnage and broken stuff, particularly here at the start of the track, trying to climb over these rocks. Okay, this is the next day, and I'm filming with the drone at this point. I just come up here to the rock, and unfortunately I'd come up, just tested out where I was going to get up past it, and I thought I'll just throw another battery in, a fresh battery in the drone. And of course I did, and I sent the drone up to film the action without pressing record, unfortunately. But from this angle here is pretty much how I drove up to it and got on it. The problem was that as soon as I was up on top of the rock and the front wheel went over to the other side, because it's only on the 30-inch tyres, it pretty much just landed straight on the slider. And from there, I needed to winch off it. I winched forward a little bit until I got some traction up on the other side of when I pulled the rear wheel up tight to that rock, and it could just drive up it as well. One of the things you could just notice there when I come back off that obstacle just then and rolled back into the other track, you could see at the speed it did it. Because in the old disco, I'm just at idle here, mucking about with all this sort of stuff, so I've pressed the brake 3 or 4 big long times, which has exhausted the brake booster. So even when you're standing on the pedal, you're rolling backwards flat out. Now, it got me here, but it got me right up at the top in a critical situation later on in the afternoon, which we'll see later. But this is probably the only advantage of the 37 crew driving everything at 7,000 revs, is you've got no shortage of vacuum in your brake booster when you need it. Okay, this is the cut between, and I just realised here that I hadn't pressed record. And just setting up, you can see how the wheel had come over the other side and the sill's just sitting hard on the rock on this side. I tried to get over more to the passenger side to drive around it, and when I come back next time I'm going to drive this without the winch, and that's a big call. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, but I'm definitely going to give it a try. If there's anything that can do it, it'll be at the disco. But the problem is because these holes are just so big, if you go down in them, you tend to land on something underneath the car. And it's, once you're sitting on a huge rock underneath the car, it's impossible to drive off it. So that's one of the biggest things I had to think about while driving up to this track. And just to run over the same ground as we always do in these videos, this is pretty bloody steep here, and it's not, it doesn't show it on the camera very much. There is points where up further where you're looking back down over the track where you can get just a bit of an idea of how steep it is. You can see here looking at the car now, if you look at the back axle, we're maxed out in the articulation because that hole is incredibly deep on that side. You'll see it fall in there. And even at that, see how maxed out that rear axle is? It's still way deeper than it looks. Of course, that's just got me hung right up now on that big boulder. But as soon as I get the back wheel up close to that boulder, I'm able to just drive up on it. But the problem's going to be getting around this even in the next time, is that even when you've got the wheel right up on that high side, say you were to get the passenger side right up on that cliff face there sort of thing before it goes down in the hole, that leaves you on the driver's side facing pretty sharply downhill. So that's definitely a rollover risk right there. This whole bit through this section here is a definite rollover risk. You can see there, and that's why I had the cable on it, even though there was sections there that I drove it, but I still had the cable on it. Where that fell into the hole, that wanted to roll over to the passenger side. The only thing keeping it from rolling back onto the windows, falling down in the hole and rolling onto the windows on that side of the car was that I had the cable on it to keep it down just a little bit. But you could see every time I got on the throttle, I'd just want to rear up and roll over into that bank. I did pick up some damage in that door too, in that hole. And same thing again here. You can see where that wheel on the passenger side rear is now down in the hole. It's just trying to transfer all that weight back over to that side that's not on the ground. And yeah, again, big rollover risk here as well. Getting up this without the winch cable on it is going to take some serious thinking and some driving and trying to get through here. There's any wrong moves and you drop into the hole where it is here because of its off angle and steep. It's basically tip it over, especially in something smaller here like a Suzuki. Or Suzuki will do good on a few places on this track, but in general this is that gnarly that the Zook will just want to tip over all the time, especially if it gets into these holes. We all know how unstable little Zooks are in those situations. Another thing you would have picked up by watching it now is this is all granitic sand through here, and because these tyres are at 18 psi, they're just too overinflated. But I just wasn't prepared to run the risk of throwing a tyre off a rim and trying to put it all back on in this section here. And for anyone that's ever driven anything on granitic sand, they'll know it's just like millions of little ball bearings underneath your tyres. It's not great for traction, that's for sure. And it's really throwing up a challenge for the one diff lock and the road bias all-terrains. When you're looking back down the hill like this, it's very hard to pick up how high those rocks are in front of the vehicle at the moment, but they're a good 800mm high at the very least. That's one of the reasons I wanted to walk up and film it. You get a whole lot better idea when you go back and watch that footage of walking up here, just how big these obstacles are. All these sections forward of those big two rocks that I started on, I'll be able to drive this next time with the tyres at 10 psi, as I will let them down next time. Everything forward of there, no worries. By picking the right line. As I mentioned, that you get off the line and fall down on a rock, then you're stuck on the top of something that's going to be very, very hard to get off. A good part of the mucking around here on this track when I went up the first time here was the stop starting when I should have just kept the momentum going and drove straight up it. But there was just all those different things going on. I mean, there didn't want to run over the winch cable, but there's all the stuff mucking about with the drone and the camera angles. There was a lot going on here. One of the other things that was going on with the drone is that I've crashed it that many times over the last couple of months. It's playing up a lot and not taking the input from the controller. You've got to get it up and fly it around in circles before it'll move forward or backwards, and that was all happening here as well, which was a pain in the neck. This is another one where I'm going to have to find another way through or another way around this bit of an obstacle, because what's happened here is that I've now got the back diff sitting on one of the big rocks up underneath it, so I'm caught. I did give it an extra pull with that winch, but you can see there it wanted to pull the tree down. I was well and truly stuck. This was a pretty easy obstacle to get off. Just throwing a rock in front of the wheel and just drove straight up on it and off it. One of the issues I'm going to have by letting the tyres down to 10 psi as I come up at next time, this is only just going to exacerbate it, because the tyres will be down to about 28 inch once they're down at around 10 psi, so clearance is even going to be more of an issue. And one of the things I probably should mention that I haven't so far about this is if I had 35s on this Discovery, I just would have already driven straight up there. And with the locker in the front also, it would have drove itself up there. The main thing that I'm doing with this discovery, and the reason I do it, and for those people that have been watching a while, is that this vehicle is all about doing it without the gear. It's about choosing a great vehicle to start with and not putting very much gear on it to go off-road, rather than choosing a not so great vehicle and spending a heap of money on it to go off-road. And at this point here, I realised there was someone up there watching me, and this is where I run into James. James had his Prado out there. He'd been out there for a couple of days. His old man was out, and his old man had only just left and went home. But James had come back late in the afternoon to camp out on that famous spot just up the top here, where you're on the flat rock overlooking the valley. And then he couldn't believe his luck. He's standing there having a beer watching some idiot trying to drive their Discovery up there. He was saying that the four-wheel drive 24/7 crew had been here just the week before. This part of the track I've been coming up now, it's impossible to see with where the drone is up high here at the moment, but these are really high, steep rocks you got to climb up on, and not finding the right line through here is going to get you stuck for absolute certain. It was all going well, and I was going to drive the whole lot, and then the next minute the drone started beeping and said it was returning to home and flew off on me. And again, you can see why most of the big cars don't come up here. It's the serious off-angle balance issues you've got on this track. You get off some of the lines and it's just wanting to turn the car over straight away. Of course, in the cab, the drone's going, the drone will return home in 10 seconds. And I'm trying to catch it here before it turns home, but it was too late. There was too much stuff going on and it took off, unfortunately. And that ruined the momentum. From there on, that next bit was a lot harder than it needed to be. And now we're back up, but we're running the problem of only bit charged batteries now. So there was just constant swapping batteries out to get the last bit of the track. But we were moving forward all right here until it slid around a bit in the back, just up further. The biggest problem with so many things going on is when you're on a section like this, you really need to be focused on where your wheels are. So, you know, wheels were going here and there, and remembering where you were before you took off. And this is how I got into the next situation, is I didn't give it enough driver's side down to try and get up over that bank over the other side. And you can see now the diff housings, front diff housings smacked up hard against that rock, this big high step, this one to get over. But now the same thing has happened down the bottom. I've pressed the brake that many times, there's hardly any vacuum left in the booster. And when I put it in reverse, I stepped right off there, couldn't pull it up. So now the driver's side rear is just hanging in the air off a big step down the bottom, which you can't see from the camera. But that was the end of that. Driving the car backwards now off that step that I'm on would be a good recipe to roll this thing over, because it's a huge step, and not knowing where you're going as you go off it, yeah, that's game over. So it's out with the winch now and pull it up over this next step. I reckon what I do now is that I mean, there's no coming back from where I was there, but I reckon if I come up it again, instead of getting into the position I'm in now, as I come up, I would have stayed hard to the passenger side and tried to come up over those two big rocks. Now, they look like nothing where they're sitting there now, but they're a huge step up. Now, the problem is that when you come up over them on the passenger side like that, they are definitely going to lean you right over. So I'll have a look at it next time. But you can see by the way the back's articulating like that, some of the ground we're on here is, yeah, serious stuff. And again, the axle housing is on that front rock there again now. So picking your way through this line up this top section, so say probably the last 15 metres, is a real challenge, because especially in a vehicle that's not lifted with huge tyres, because the whole time you're trying to pick your way through where you're not going to get caught on anything. And the only way to do that is to be up on top of the most gnarliest stuff there. So it really is a catch-22. It's just one of those things that, you know, it's a lot harder to drive a vehicle that's got nothing done to it than a vehicle that's got all the bells and whistles. and you've really got to have some faith to get up on top of those obstacles, how well balanced and capable it is, because one slip off any of them and yeah, you're barrel rolling back down the hill. I wasn't actually going to post any of this up. I was just going to come back and film it just driving the track. But I thought I will post it up because it's quite an interesting video at just how calm and relaxed you can come up something like this, because it was very ill prepared this trip and there was no stress about turning the car over. It's tracks like this that big lifted cars begin to pay their price for being so lifted, because they turn over a lot easier, lifted cars, especially on bits of track like this. I've now got a rock front and rear holding the axles up at the moment. The only way I can get out of the situation I'm in now and not do any damage to the vehicle is get out and move a couple of rocks around so that I can just drive it. It's just pointless trying to skull drag it over the rocks like that. Sometimes you can get away with it, that's why I give it a bit of a crack to start with. Sometimes it takes very little to pop over and slide along the rock and get over it. It's always worth a little try, but I don't go too crazy. But James has got some really good afternoon entertainment. That's the positive side of it. And while this is all going on, we're doing bit charges here of batteries, trying to keep the drone up to film the last bit. When I went to edit it, I mustn't have pressed, so I got the drone up for to drive the last bit, because I ended up driving this because I had the rocks under the wheels. And mustn't have pressed record again. Unbelievable. There was just way too much going on. I just said goodbye to James here. He was over there on the flat rock for his camp out. And wicked sunset. This is when I'd already got to the top, and this is filming the bit of the road back up to the fire tower here at Mount Hickey. You can see how great these big bore AFS shock absorbers are that I fitted to this. It's just so soft, so plush in these big rocks. What's really good about them is when you go back on road, like a lot of four-wheel drives that are set up nice off-road drive like pigs on road, that's no surprise. But the Disco doesn't. They are just, because I've kept pretty close to standard height, so the suspension geometry is working like it should. Once I get out of here, not only have I come up a track like that, I can drive it home like the day it left the factory. Suspension-wise, it still handles really, really well on the road. The bigger you get, the more you've got to lift them, obviously, because they're longer. But they just never, ever handle as good on the road anymore, once you've lifted them and squeezed the big tyres in. There's still some really great tracks that I want to tackle in the Discovery while it's running the way it is at the moment, with the 30-inch tyres, well, 30-inch road bias tyres, the 50mm lift and the one locker, because it really shows how much more four-wheel driving you can do and the places you can go for very little money by choosing the right size classic four-wheel drive. I just thought here I'd throw in some footage of coming up the first chute here on phone track. It's in cab. I filmed it with a handheld camera, so but it gives you a really good idea of inside the car of that first section and how close you are to the edges and the granite rocks that are sticking out. It's just one of those tracks that you are going to do damage. I'd be prepared for damage. It's a black track. It's twin diff locks, big tyres and all that recommended. Stuck on a rock underneath already here. I came back, but I couldn't actually see what grabbed me. This is a great example of how the perception from the camera is not showing you all these steps. Some of these steps in here are quite huge, and they jump right up out of one side of the track so that your car maxes out the flex and pulls you up if you're not locked. That huge bang was coming back off and landed on a boulder on the slider on the passenger side. Another coat of paint and I would have had this big granite boulder sticking out there on the left. The absolute ease at how these things do it, relatively standard, is quite incredible. This is one of those tracks that if you Google it and you watch a few YouTube videos of most people that come up here, you'll get to see what it's like and sound like on the limiter. Okay, that's it for another video. I'm just about back up now to where I started off this one, at that boulder at the start of the top section. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and I'll be back shortly to see if I can drive this whole lot of that section that I come up without the winch.